So as always, there's an insane amount of stuff happening regarding spaceflight. First, of course, we'd like to recapitulate last week's amazing 150-meter Starhopper flight. We haven't talked about it yet in detail. Then, SpaceX is actually already planning to transport Starship from Boca, Florida to Kennedy Space Center in September. But when will we be able to finally see the Starship prototypes fly?
And just when you thought that Starship 1 is already insanely impressive, Elon comes forth and suddenly starts thinking about Starship 2.0. And let us tell you, it is like Starship 1 on roids. And then you won't believe it, and we also didn't believe it honestly, but apparently now the James Webb Space Telescope is 100% finished. And soon we'll be able to start the hunt for life on exoplanets in other solar systems. So stay tuned for these amazing space news.
First, of course, we want to talk about this amazing event that occurred last week. The successful 150-meter high flight of Starhopper. So after a long back and forth with the FAA approval still pending for the Starhopper test flight, a revised FAA approval for a maximum altitude of 150 meters instead of 200 meters was given out, clearing the way for a 150-meter hopping test as soon as the 26th of August, lasting until the 29th, while the first attempt on the 26th had to be cancelled shortly before the liftoff. The second attempt on the 27th of August was not aborted. On the contrary, and we could witness this magnificent water tank lift off the ground vertically in a precise manner. We could witness how the Starhopper moved direction only using the actuation of the Raptor engine itself. Only once during the flight were the cold gas thrusters activated for fine-tuning. The whole flight took only 57 seconds. But it was certainly an awe-inspiring sight, which just lets us guess how incredible looking Starship will be when launched together with Super Heavy.
So now that Starhopper has fulfilled its duty, it is to become a test stand for future Raptor engines. Now the focus will shift entirely to the Starship Mark 1 and 2 prototypes in Boca Chica, Texas and Cocoa, Florida. Now if everything goes according to plan, and we all know it never does, we can expect the first suborbital test flights of really Starship-y looking Starship prototypes to occur as early as October, but let's be realistic here, probably in November. However, the fact alone that we will be able to see suborbital test flights of functioning Starship prototypes this year is testimony to the incredible pace with which the Starship program is moving forward at SpaceX. So while work on the interior of the Starship prototypes is progressing further, we can see more and more parts of the Super Heavy booster lying around and being prepared to be assembled in Cocoa, Florida.
Now interestingly, SpaceX is already planning to transport Starship from Cocoa to Kennedy Space Center. Cargo transport company Rolllift USA just recently submitted a permit application to the Florida Department of Transportation, seeking to move a tank to the KSC over a 2-week period in September. So a tank? According to the permit application, Starship will first be transported on a 15-axle truck and trailer, and then on a quite large barge to the Kennedy Space Center. A total trip distance of 20 miles from Cocoa. We just hope that the Cocoa Starship won't be damaged by Hurricane Dorian, and it seems that SpaceX is already preparing for this event. We are really looking forward to see Starship being relocated to the KSC, where it will launch for the suborbital flights. At the earliest in October, of course Elon time, so probably in November, normal time.
And just when we thought that the current generation of Starship is so insanely far ahead of anything else available on the rocket market today, Elon suddenly comes forth and ponders already on how the next generation of Starship would have to look. So he recently took to Twitter, answering someone called Freiraum, cool German name by the way, who wanted to see a 12-meter diameter for the next generation Starship. If you remember, the first version of Starship that was ever shown to the public was called Interplanetary Transport System, and had a 12-meter diameter, among other pretty wild specs. Then the people at SpaceX and Elon probably realized that the interplanetary transport system was maybe a bit too ambitious for the first generation of the Starship, and that they had to tune it down a little bit in order to drive down costs and make it a bit more realistic. The second iteration of Starship was called BFR, Big Falcon Rocket, or Big Rocket of course, and now the third iteration we have is called Starship and Super Heavy.
And we will probably learn a lot more about Starship and Super Heavy on Elon's upcoming Starship presentation, which according to the latest information is now set to take place on the 28th of September. But 12 meters was of course not enough for Elon. Come on, a 12-meter diameter? So he said 18 meters. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, twice the diameter of the current generation Starship and Super Heavy. The cool people over at Teslarati, a site we love very much by the way, went a bit further and imagined a Starship 2.0 being exactly twice the size of Starship 1.0. So not only twice the diameter, but also twice the height. Now let's do some fun calculations. We can approximate the shape of the pressurized crew compartment of Starship as a cylinder. And a cylinder with twice the diameter and twice the height has 8 times the volume. And remember, the current generation Starship has already an interior volume of 1000 cubic meters, which is a bit more than the entire ISS with its 910 cubic meters. This monstrosity would therefore have an interior volume of 8 times of the entire ISS. Or let's take this insanely large plant, BA2100 inflatable space station by Bigelow Aerospace, with an interior volume of 2100 cubic meters. This would be almost 4 times the interior space of the BA2100. This is absolutely insane!
And since Super Heavy 2.0 would now offer 4 times the surface area of Super Heavy 1.0, we could see 4 times as many Raptor engines attached. So 4 times 31, 124 Raptor engines attached to Super Heavy 2.0. This is just insane. This would enable to bring payloads to the Moon and Mars multiple times higher than with the current generation of Starship and Super Heavy. And of course, Starship 2.0 could transport many more people to Mars and back than Starship 1. Probably hundreds, maybe even thousands. I mean, it's fun to speculate on how insane Starship 2.0 will be, but let's for the time being focus on Starship 1, because in our opinion Starship 1 is already extremely insane and so far ahead of anything the competition has to offer, honestly. The competition from the United Launch Alliance like Boeing, Lockheed or Blue Origin even, they have nothing coming even remotely close to Starship 1. Nothing. Starship 1 is already in a league of its own, so Starship 2.0 is like pew. So yeah, Starship 1 is for the time being insane enough. But of course it's still fun to ponder on how insane Starship 2.0 will be probably like 10 years down the line.
And then in other news, we can finally marvel at a complete, like 100% complete, James Webb Space Telescope. After so many delays and setbacks, we were starting to think that it might not be before 2025 until we see the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope finally be launched. The plan is to bring the JWST to the Earth-Sun Lagrange point L2, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, so that it is absolutely unperturbed by Earth or moonlight in any way. With its giant mirror, which is 2.5 times the diameter of the mirror of the Hubble Space Telescope, it will have over 6 times the light capture power of the Hubble.
Now this instrument here will have a sensitivity high enough to measure the chemical composition of exoplanet atmospheres, that is, the atmospheres of planets in other solar systems light years away from Earth. I just want to repeat this again to emphasize how amazing this is. With the James Webb Space Telescope, we will have the capability to analyze the atmospheres of other planets, potentially Earth-like rocky planets in the habitable zone of their parent stars light years away in other solar systems. It will be able to detect so-called biomarker gases. Now, biomarker gases are gases such as methane or oxygen that are very strong indicators for the presence of biological life. Now, newer research suggests that there is a combination of gases involving CO2, carbon monoxide and some other gases that only can arise due to the existence of biological life. Now, if we look for such a combination of gases and the James Webb Telescope would allow for this, then we could really discover life on other planets in other solar systems. And this goes even further. SETI actually proposes to detect pollutant gases such as, for example, FCKW molecules or other pollutant gases which only could arise from the presence of a technological civilization. Well, at least then we'd also know that we are not the only ones freaking stupid enough to pollute their home planet. We would then know that this is kind of a universal thing. Kind of every technological civilization does it in their childhood days. So now you know why we are so super hyped for the James Webb Space Telescope, Jixuan and me, and why we hope that this time it will not be postponed and that it will launch according to plan in March 2021. And what do you say to this insane Starship 2.0? Do you agree with us that it's like a Starship 1 on steroids?
And are you as excited as we are about the James Webb Space Telescope? I mean, this thing with the biomarker gases is really amazing, right?
Absolutely. I mean, hello, aliens! So be sure to subscribe and share it with your friends and see you next time.
See you! 12 meter? Seriously? Come on. I mean, this thing with the biomarker. I mean, this thing with the biomarker. God.